Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Biblical Prepping. I'm Judith Garten. This is the prepper portion. This is going to be an interesting video for you. I don't know how much I'm going to get talked about before we have to eat. And I might become a silent movie in a few minutes. We'll see. But what we're going to do today is for tonight's dinner and probably leftover for tomorrow night's dinner, because I'm praying that my mixed up recipe here will make enough for us to enjoy into tomorrow night's Sabbath dinner. It is preparation day and I'm trying to do multiple things at the same time. I have bagels in the oven. I'll link to that video. And we're going to be using up some food storage and some yard trash in a pot of lentil soup. Intrigued? Let's get going. Okay, so for this soup, I'm going to start with the recipe. The recipe is one that I've had on Biblical Prepping for a number of years. I actually created this recipe because Jim and I love a lentil soup that was made by a large manufacturer. I was able to mimic their creation without all of their salt, without all of their icky ingredients, weird named products added to it. This was created so that we could use freeze-dried foods. Now currently on our website, biblicalprepping.com, I only have up the recipe using the freeze-dried foods. I'm going to be changing that up today because we used to market a particular brand of freeze-dried foods. We don't anymore, so I'm going to be changing that recipe for you and just putting in the words freeze-dried. You can also use dehydrated products in this as well if you have dehydrated vegetables. The base for this soup not only makes a great Italian lentil soup, but leave the lentils out and throw in mixed vegetables and you have a really wonderful vegetarian vegetable soup that also is like one of the ones made by a different manufacturer. Now, I will say today my version is not technically vegetarian because I am going to be using home canned chicken broth. Now, what I am going to do is tell you what the ingredients are that I've got assembled here. And if you want to go look at the recipe, please go look at biblicalprepping.com. It's under the PDF section where you can print out a copy of the one using the freeze-dried or dehydrated foods. What we're going to be doing today is trying to get rid of some of the things that we have in the pantry and in the refrigerator. So, as our basis, this has a tomato broth to it. I have here, that front pot is our lentils, all ready to rock and roll. I have here a pan of leftover gravy. Gravy in our house, if you hear me use that term, is not the brown stuff you put on meat and potatoes. Gravy in our house is, because this is how Jim's family has always said it, is the red stuff you put on spaghetti. So I have in here a leftover half a pot and I grabbed another container out of the freezer that needs to get rotated through. So that is ready to go. I started this year canning spaghetti sauce again and I'm so excited. So I got to get rid of whatever's in the freezer. Now that is already full of herbs and spices. It's got onion, garlic, oregano, basil, and parsley in it. But I am actually going to add more of whatever's needed. So I have my herbs here in case I need them. So we're starting with water and that as our sauce. I will be adding water as I go along. Next, you need some chopped onion and some chopped garlic. Now, I'm going to move these off the table in case the table gets wiggly. These are broth, chicken broth, that I have had in the pantry since last fall. They need to get used, so we're rotating, and waste not, want not. We're going to set these over here. That is the chicken broth. Now, I hate peeling garlic. Don't forget your extra virgin olive oil. I hate peeling garlic. But a while ago we watched cooking classes and it is so simple to just peel it like so. It takes so much less time. And it's actually less mess. Well, most of the time. That one got pretty smashed. Now, I did not bring a small knife. Excuse me while I zip out of the picture. My baby paring knife and my handy little trash bowl. This trash bowl is now taking the ingredients from this and either putting it in the garbage soup bag in the freezer, because I'm going to can more broth, or into our composter. These look kind of grungy as far as carrots go, so I'm going to move those aside for the composter. What's going in this dish now will go in our garbage soup bag. And make sure you check out that video on YouTube as well. Now I'm just cutting off the ends that are a little brown. Don't want those to end up in our soup. Making sure I get out any bad spots, because some of the garlic does have a little bit of bad, and all the skin. I forgot. I have to chop onion. This is my Pampered Chef chopper. Love, love, love. One of my favorite tools. I say that about all my Pampered Chef tools, but love this one. It looks old, but this is my brand new one I just got September of 2021. That tells you how well loved and used it is. It's already looks like the plastic is 10 years old. Scrape that out. There's my onion and garlic, all chopped and ready to go. All right, there we go. Now we're going to take these garlic scraps, put them in my bowl so they don't end up in my soup pot. And we're going to move the onion aside. Next, we're going to use another Pampered Chef tool. This is the crinkle cutter. Another one I love, love, love. I'm going to cut thin slices of carrot. Cute little crinkles in it. I'm getting better at using this faster, but I am nervous because I worry about my fingers. I have a bad habit of cutting my fingers in the kitchen. We use a lot of Band-Aids. All right, here we go. All that is done. Now, if we had some fresh basil already in the garden, I would be using some of that as well, but we don't as yet. I haven't even started any seeds, even though it's April something. Now, this is what I was talking about as far as the garbage from the yard. See that? This is, some people say crazy cress, some people say cress, some people call it wild mustard. I call it yummy. It's packed full of nutrients, it's packed full of good things, but it's no longer packed full of slugs. We have slugs in our yard, like to the max. I bring this in when I pick it. I pick through it, make sure there's no grass left in it, because sometimes I find clumps of it in the yard, so I'll pick the clump from the yard. I prefer that it grows where I tell it to, but it's a weed technically, and it grows wherever it wants. It's actually going to become a part of our woodland garden that I'm adding to our prayer garden. I'm going to put a nice big row of this in so that it will constantly reseed itself, and I don't have to worry about doing it every year, and it'll just keep growing and growing and growing. I'm also going to be putting in that same area some ferns that are supposed to be edible when they're in that little curly phase. I've never eaten them, so we'll see how that goes. What else is going in there? Mint, oregano, a lemon balm, and one other herb, and I cannot remember which one it is. There's some that really like water, and this area where we're going to be putting it in needs some absorption. So we're going to let these things do their job, grow naturally, and prayerfully reseed themselves every year, or continue to grow as far as the perennials go, like the mint and things like that. I am hoping that with the mint and the lemon balm, which can get out of control, I can try and control them a little bit by wild harvesting everything that grows. So so that we can use it for making teas, tinctures, whatever we need. So, all right, I'm gonna set this aside. I'll be right back. I need to check the bagels. So before we chop the crazy cress, the yard greens, I'm gonna have a sip of my cafe mocha if you wanna know how I made this. And this size cup at some of those national brands like Starbucks or whatnot, I don't even want to venture a guess on how much it would cost, but it didn't cost me but maybe 50 cents. So 50 cents is a whole lot better than whatever it would cost there. Plus I know that all the ingredients went in are ones I like. All right, so I don't want to chop this too small, but I definitely want it chopped because I'm not one of those people who appreciates when you're in the middle of eating a bowl of soup, you take out a spoonful, and what happens? One of those green things, all slimy and whatnot, slaps you wet on the chin, hot, it gives you chin burn. So we're gonna chop those. Before I do that, let's get started with the stove. I've put about 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil in the bottom of the pot. I don't want to add a lot of oil, so we're gonna just add a little bit. We just want to cook the carrots, onions, and garlic until the onions and garlic are clear and fragrant. For this I use my super long ancient wooden spoon. Keeps my fingers away from the hot pot. Now after those reach the phase of fragrant and clear, you want to go ahead and add in your greens and any of your other herbs if you're going to add additional herbs. I still actually don't know yet how it's going to go with adding the pre-made sauce, the gravy. So I'm gonna wait to add herbs until later after it simmers a bit. Now these fresh greens are probably not going to be enough for the whole pot. I do have a bag of spinach in the refrigerator, but I want to save that for some salads and things. So what I did is I knew there was a jar of, I haven't got a clue, in the pantry. This is something I dehydrated last year, and oh, it says March of 2020. Okay, so March of 2020, there is no mold. It is good. It's just simply mixed greens, it says. What I apparently did was I took greens and put them in the dehydrator, forgot to write myself a note of what it was. So this actually looks like it might be chopped kale from the grocery store that comes in one of those big cellophane bags. Because it does have a lot of really tough looking stems. So I'm going to chop this, put it in the soup, see how things go throughout the day. As it cooks, if by chance I need to add more greens, I need to get rid of these because I already have 2 jars of dehydrated spinach in the pantry that I know are good and have been dehydrated in the last 6 months or so. So I know those are good. So these need to get used. I will open these, and if they don't smell good, they won't be in the soup. If they smell good, they'll go in the soup. If they don't go in the soup, I have dried spinach as another option. So let's chop these guys up while the onions and garlic are getting fragrant. Now all I do is use the rocker motion of the crinkle cutter and go through these greens, making sure I press all the way through to the cutting board. If I see any pieces that are still a little large, I put them on top. It seems to help them chop a little better. So there we go. There's a long one that'll slap you on the chin. All right, there we go. Now, I smell the onions and the garlic. I'm hoping that means that they are ready for their green friends. Not quite. Turn it up, and I do need just a little tiny bit more olive oil. There, the higher heat did it really nicely. Pretty soon you're going to hear the bagel thing go off again, so I'm just giving you that heads up. Throw those yard greens in there. Pile up my dirty dishes. This is my bag of garbage soup ingredients. This is where I put all the vegetable scraps that are good enough to put into a soup that I would actually make into a soup, because this is going to become broth. I don't put anything in here that's moldy, disgusting, grody, slimy, grungy, whatnot. And as you can see, like for example, here's some celery stalks that were just limp and old, and we have a brand new one. So I went ahead, throw those in with my garlic and carrot scraps. And yes, a little piece of the yard greens ended up in there as well. One thing that is really important for you to do, learn what's edible in your neighborhood. If you're in a pinch and you need it, you'll be able to find all kinds of delicious things growing right around you. And if you can find out how they like to grow, you can even learn to grow them as purposeful weeds. All right, so now, whoops, threw some greens on the floor. This is ready to go. Now this is going to be a vegetarian style meal because it's not going to have any meat in it at all. I have the lentils. I started early this morning, soaking and then simmering. So we are now going to open our jars of broth and check them. My mom always said the nose knows. Oh gosh, that smells yummy. Both smell wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and add the broth to my pot. And then I'm going to turn up the temperature to about medium high. Bring it to a boil. And then after it comes to a boil, I will pour in the gravy. All right, now our soup is boiling. There's not a lot of water in here. So we're gonna add this red gravy, just packed full of fragrance and flavors. This was left over the other night from a batch of pizza that we made. And as I said, one container was from out of the freezer. I'm gonna run grab some water. I will be right back. All right, I'm going to add a little bit more of our filtered water. And that should be enough. I've added about, what is that? A quart, maybe a little bit more than a quart. And that will, I'm gonna bring it to a boil, and it's going to go back down to simmer, and it will be simmering all day. As it's getting ready to boil, one thing I like to do is taste test it to see where we are at with salt, because I tend not to add a lot of salt to products I don't have to add a lot of salt to. For example, the broth that I canned had salt in it because you need that as a preservative, and then I pressure canned it. However, I don't know that it's going to be enough for this whole pot of soup. Now is the time I will taste test for the salt. I will allow the herbs a little bit longer to blend through the sauce, and then we will let you know later. I will do some silent movies as it goes throughout the day and show you the different phases, such as adding the lentils and whatnot, and the dried greens if we go down that road. But the way our afternoon worked out, with customer Zoom calls and whatnot, I wasn't able to video any more of the soup. So I took some stills and let me share what took place. First thing I did after simmering for several hours was taste test everything, and everything was perfect. I didn't need to add any salt, pepper, or herbs of any kind, and that gravy worked perfectly as an addition instead of just a plain can of tomatoes. I did, however, smell test that jar of mixed greens I was going to add in. It was definitely well past time, so I dumped that out for the compost. Now, those recommendations for shelf life on home dehydrated foods really need to be taken more seriously in our pantry as well as your own, so make sure that you keep an eye on those and put your date on them. I will be watching that much more closely this year. Now, I also added some of that dried spinach that we had in the pantry instead. Those yard greens were not quite enough to give the soup the greens that I desired for that particular day. Now the lentils, they were perfect. I had plenty of those, and when I opened up the pan, they were perfectly done. I did rinse them off a little bit, and then I just poured them into the pot. Now we served the soup that night with some Parmesan cheese and some fresh homemade all-wheat bread. Of course, we ate it so quickly I forgot to take pictures. Instead, I'm going to show you a bowl of pasta fagioli that I made that same week as well. Both soups are very similar, and the pasta fagioli has, of course, pasta and white beans rather than the lentils. But they're both very similar in flavor. There have been times, though, when we've added pasta actually to the lentil soup and eaten it just as though we were making pasta fagioli. So, sprinkle it with Parmesan and enjoy some bread or even some fresh-made focaccia. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video so far. For now, I'm going to add blessings and shalom.